It dictates our lives, our daily decisions, literally the entire structure of global societies. But what exactly is money? I mean, if you really stop and think about it, the paper in our wallets and those little digits on our screens are entirely abstract concepts. Yet we trade our time, our energy, and our precious resources for them every single day. So today, we're going to unpack this massive fundamental mystery.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going on a really fascinating journey. We'll be starting all the way down at those stray coins jingling in your pocket and zooming way out to the massive, complex machinery of global inflation. We're going to strip away all the dense economic jargon and get right to the core mechanics of how value actually moves through our world. Let's jump in.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll answer, what actually is money? Then, we'll look at the 4 functions of money, move on to how we go about measuring the money supply, and finally, we'll wrap up by understanding and tracking inflation.
All right, Section 1. What actually is money? Let's define the cash in our pockets.
You know, to truly understand money, we really have to look past the physical paper or the metal. According to the economist Crowther, money is defined as simply anything that is generally acceptable as a means of exchange and that at the same time acts as a measure and store of value. Basically, the true magic of money lies entirely in that general acceptability part. It literally only works because you and everyone around you completely agrees that it works. It's a shared illusion, right?
Now, when we start categorizing money, a pretty wild quirk of the system emerges. On one hand, we have currency money. This is the fiat paper and coins created by the government. And crucially, it's legal tender. That means you are bound by law to accept it for payments. But then, there's deposit money, like the balance in your checking account. Believe it or not, that is strictly not legal tender. You can absolutely legally refuse to accept a payment via check from someone. Why? Because that transaction relies completely on your trust that their check is actually going to clear at the bank.
And this actually brings up a super fascinating difference between limited and unlimited legal tender. Unlimited legal tender, like your large currency notes, must be accepted to pay off any debt no matter how huge. But limited legal tender, that's only accepted up to a specific maximum limit. For example, historically, in India, small coins like the 5, 10, or 25 paise coins were only legal tender up to a total of 25 rupees. So yeah, you could actually legally refuse someone if they tried paying off a massive, life-changing debt by dumping a towering mountain of tiny coins on your desk. Pretty funny to think about, right?
Moving on to Section 2, the 4 functions of money, or how money actually moves society.
So, to help us remember these functions, Professor Kenley came up with this incredibly catchy little rhyme. It goes, money is a matter of functions 4, a medium, a measure, a standard, a store. It's kind of cheesy, I know, but honestly, it's the perfect mental checklist for understanding money's absolute utility in our daily lives.
Let's break those 4 functions down real quick. First up, it's a medium of exchange. This is huge because it totally eliminates the exhausting double coincidence of wants that people needed in ancient barter systems. You know, you don't have to wander around finding a shoemaker who specifically wants your apples. You just sell your apples for money and buy shoes with that money. Problem solved. Second, it's a measure of value. It gives us a universal unit of account, basically what we call prices. Third, it acts as a standard of deferred payments. This just means we can comfortably write contracts for future payments, things like loans, pensions, or salaries, all in standardized units. And finally, number 4, it's a store of value. Because money is perfectly liquid, you can hold onto it today and trust that it's going to store your purchasing power for tomorrow.
Now, building on that idea of general acceptability, money performs another absolutely crucial secondary function, transferring value. Think about a highly tangible example here. You can sell a physical house in Delhi, receive money, and then use that exact same money to buy a completely different house all the way over in Kolkata. In this way, money acts almost like a teleportation device for value. It literally lets you instantly and safely move massive wealth across an entire country.
Okay, let's head into Section 3, measuring the money supply. Just how much is actually out there?
So what's really interesting here is the stark contrast in how different economies rely on physical cash versus bank money. When we measure the money supply, which is simply the total stock of money held by the public at any given point in time, the components look completely different depending on where you look. For instance, in India, physical currency makes up about 50% of the total money supply. But over in the US, because of their massive digital and credit card infrastructure, physical cash is only about 18% of the supply. That's a huge difference.
So how exactly does a central bank keep track of all this?
Well, they use this sort of funnel of liquidity, ranging from M1 all the way down to M4. M1 is the narrowest measure. It's just the highly liquid stuff you can spend right this second, like cash and checking accounts. It focuses strictly on money as a medium of exchange. Then, M2 expands on that by adding post office savings. Moving down, M3 takes that highly liquid M1 cash and adds time deposits, acknowledging the money that's locked away as a store of value. And finally, M4 includes the whole shebang, M3 plus total post office deposits. As you can see, it builds progressively from the cash right there in your hand to less and less liquid savings.
Aside from those MM measures, economists also track something called high-powered money, or the monetary base, often denoted as MO. This is the actual currency in circulation, plus the deposits held by commercial banks as reserves with the central bank. Now here's the absolute crucial point you need to take away. The money supply only refers to money held by the public. This high-powered base does not include the money locked away in government treasuries or cash produced by the central bank that isn't circulating yet. It only counts what is actively interacting with the public and the banking system.
Let's zoom out for our final section, Section 4, Understanding and Tracking Inflation, or what happens when the whole system overheats.
First things first, we really need to clarify what true inflation actually is. Inflation refers to a persistent and prolonged rise in the general price level of goods and services. A one-time spike in prices at the grocery store, that is not true inflation. Furthermore, a mild 2 to 3% rise per year is actually considered highly desirable and healthy for an economy because it helps maintain a high level of economic activity. True inflation is when that upward trend becomes excessive, persistent, and compounding year over year.
Now, there are generally two major culprits behind an overheating economy. The first is what we call demand pull inflation. This happens when an increase in the supply of money stimulates overall demand so heavily that aggregate demand outpaces aggregate supply. Simply put, firms just cannot produce goods fast enough, so you end up with too much money chasing too few goods, which inevitably pulls prices up. The second culprit is cost push inflation. This one originates purely from the supply side. When the sheer cost of making goods skyrockets, say due to a massive spike in global oil prices, producers are basically forced to push those extra costs directly onto us, the consumers.
Let's look a little closer at a specific type of cost push inflation called wage push inflation. It honestly operates exactly like a domino effect. Step 1. Powerful trade unions successfully negotiate and secure higher wage rates for their workers. Awesome for them, right? But then, Step 2, producers immediately face rising labor costs to maintain their workforce, which leads to Step 3. To cover those higher costs and keep their business alive, producers have absolutely no choice but to raise retail prices. A continuous series of these wage increases leads directly to a persistent price rise for literally everyone.
But hey, costs aren't the only thing that can push prices up. We also have something called profit push inflation. This occurs when massive monopolies or oligopolies use their immense market power to artificially increase their profit margins. Because they face little to zero competition in the market, they can simply decide, you know what, we want to make more profit per item. And boom, they push prices up without any underlying increase in their actual production costs whatsoever.
Wow, we have covered some incredible ground today. We've seen exactly how money is defined, how it functions in our daily lives, how governments measure it, and how its value can be so easily eroded by inflation. But I want to leave you with this somewhat provocative thought. As we learned at the very beginning of this explainer, modern paper money has literally no intrinsic value. It operates entirely on fiat, and its whole existence relies on our general acceptability. It is, at its core, a shared psychological belief. So, if money is just a shared belief, what happens to the very fabric of society when runaway inflation completely shatters that trust? Something